Have you ever noticed how sometimes the moment a woman lets a man go is exactly when he starts falling for her the hardest? It's as if her absence speaks louder than 1,000 words, and her quiet strength awakens something inside him that presence never could. Today, let's explore why this paradox happens and what it really reveals about love, respect, and the power of letting go. When a woman chooses to let a man go because he no longer aligns with her emotional needs, values, or vision for love, it reveals something incredibly powerful, her sense of self-worth. This isn't just about walking away from a person, it's about walking toward herself. It's a quiet revolution of the soul, one where she stops negotiating her standards for the sake of being understood or accepted. Men may not always consciously register this in the moment, but emotionally it hits them in ways that are often deep and unexpected. The woman who can walk away without a scene, without blame, without trying to fix or force, leaves behind a very clear imprint. She knows who she is. This kind of self-worth isn't about arrogance or superiority, it's about alignment. A woman with self-worth doesn't beg for attention, affection, or effort. She recognizes when something is no longer growing, when the connection has become one-sided, or when she's pouring love into a cup with no bottom. Rather than continuing to exhaust herself trying to fill a space that keeps leaking, she simply chooses to stop, not out of spite, not to wound, but because she has learned that love, real love, doesn't require self-abandonment. When a man is on the receiving end of this kind of departure, it often leaves a deeper impact than he expects. Because while he may have been in control of the relationship dynamic, holding back, staying distant, taking her presence for granted, he now faces a reality he didn't prepare for. She's not chasing, she's not trying harder, she's not waiting around to see if he'll change, she's choosing herself. And that's where the emotional weight comes crashing in. A man may not have realized how much she meant to him while she was there. He begins to see it in her absence, not just because she's gone, but because of how she left. Her exit, driven by self-respect, leaves no wounds for him to argue with. There are no cruel words to defend against, no drama to distract from the truth. There is only the clarity of her decision and the dignity in her silence. And that's often when a man begins to fall into reflection, fall into regret, fall into the recognition of what he lost and why he lost it. He realizes he was with a woman who didn't just want love, she knew what kind of love she needed, and she wasn't going to settle for less. That kind of woman, the one who lets go, not to punish but to preserve herself, stays in a man's heart, not because she tried to make herself unforgettable, but because her self-worth made her undeniable. And when a man is finally ready to love at the level she deserved, he often finds that she's already gone, not in bitterness, but in peace. And that peace becomes the standard he didn't know he needed. When a woman sets boundaries that are both firm and loving, she's not pushing a man away, she's inviting him into a deeper, more conscious connection. Men may not always recognize this invitation immediately, but the impact it leaves is lasting. Boundaries, when rooted in self-awareness and emotional clarity, create a safe structure within which love can actually grow. They are not walls to keep someone out, but frameworks that define what a woman will and will not accept in her emotional world. For a man, especially one who has been used to emotional leeway or minimal accountability, this kind of boundary can be disarming and magnetic all at once. And the loving boundary says, I care for you, but I care for myself too. It communicates that love isn't just about presence, it's about respect, emotional maturity, and reciprocity. When a woman communicates these lines without anger, without guilt-tripping, but from a centered place of self-respect, it triggers a very specific kind of awareness in the man. He begins to see her as someone who knows her value, someone who won't tolerate careless behavior, but who also isn't trying to control or manipulate. She's simply standing in her truth, and that truth can be both challenging and deeply attractive. Many men aren't taught how to respond to boundaries in an emotionally intelligent way. At first they may pull away or resist, mistaking boundaries for rejection or emotional distance. But in time, especially if the woman holds her boundary with grace and consistency, it shifts something in him. He starts to realize that her limits are not about limiting love, they're about protecting its integrity. She's showing him what it means to love from a place of emotional balance. She won't overextend, overgive, or over-explain. And in doing so, she sets a standard not just for how she wants to be treated, but for how he must grow if he wants to meet her at her level. This can be a defining moment for a man. He may have never been asked to show up fully, to communicate more clearly, or to take responsibility for his emotional energy. But now he is. And the woman isn't doing it with force or demands. She's doing it by simply refusing to accept anything less than what feels emotionally right to her. That quiet, unwavering presence teaches him more than any argument ever could. It teaches him that love isn't about losing oneself to stay connected. It's about staying connected while remaining whole. When a man reflects on a woman who had the courage to create space where needed, to say no when it mattered, and to walk away if those boundaries were violated, he doesn't forget her, because she didn't just ask for love, she taught what real love looks like. Not the easy kind, not the performative kind, but the grounded kind that refuses to shrink or chase. And in doing so, she becomes unforgettable. When a woman walks away, she doesn't just leave a physical space. She leaves behind an emotional presence that lingers in the air long after she's gone. Men often don't realize the depth of that presence until it's no longer available to them. While she was there, her warmth, her care, her availability might have been taken for granted, seen as constants that would always be within reach. But when she chooses to step back, when her voice no longer fills the silence and her energy no longer cushions the emotional gaps, a man is left with a stillness he isn't prepared for. And it is in that stillness that realization begins to bloom. Absence has a way of making truth louder. Without her responding to his texts, without her laughter to soften his rough edges, without her emotional support during his silent storms, a man starts to feel the echo of everything she brought into his life. And it's not always the big things that hit him first. It's the small, consistent details. The way she looked at him when he spoke. The way she remembered the things that mattered. The way she offered understanding when he couldn't even find words for his own feelings. In her absence, these moments no longer blend into the background. They rise to the surface. That emotional vacancy is not just about what is missing. It's about who is missing. And when a woman has loved sincerely, when she is given from a place of depth, her absence creates a kind of emotional void that can't be filled with distractions or temporary attention. A man may try to move on quickly or drown the silence in noise, but sooner or later, the reality of her absence settles in. He starts to realize that her presence was not just about comfort. It was a reflection of stability, care, and emotional richness. He may remember times he felt indifferent, times he overlooked her efforts or dismissed her concerns, and now there's no one there to express them again. She's gone, not in retaliation, but in resolution. And that's what makes it even more powerful. She didn't walk away with chaos. She left with clarity. That kind of goodbye doesn't scream, it whispers. And in that whisper, a man starts to hear everything he didn't listen to before. The contrast between her presence and her absence becomes a mirror for his emotional awareness. What he once viewed as normal now feels like a loss. The things he didn't say, the time he didn't invest, the attention he withheld, they all come into focus. And because she isn't trying to come back, because she has truly let go, the reality of what he lost becomes undeniable. He falls not because she is chasing him, but because the echo of her love is louder than he ever expected it to be. And that echo becomes a lesson he never thought he'd need. When a woman lets a man go, It often isn't out of anger or resentment. It's a quiet act of emotional redirection. She doesn't slam the door. She gently closes it because she knows staying any longer would mean losing more of herself. That decision, though painful, is one of deep emotional maturity. It speaks to her ability to recognize what can't be forced and her refusal to continue participating in a dynamic that isn't nurturing her growth. While it may seem like rejection to the man in the moment, what he's really experiencing is her shift in direction, a choice to stop pouring into something that isn't reciprocating or evolving. Men often aren't emotionally prepared for this kind of departure. When a woman leaves in peace, when she doesn't engage in blame or chase closure that may never come, she forces a man to sit with the discomfort of what he failed to nurture. It's in this space that redirection begins. He is now left to process not only her absence, but the way in which she chose to leave. She didn't burn bridges, she simply walked away when it was clear the path no longer led to mutual fulfillment. And that kind of departure carries a weight far greater than one laced with drama or conflict. He begins to see that she didn't let go because she didn't care. She let go because she cared enough about herself to no longer stay somewhere her emotional needs were unmet. This challenges him in ways he didn't expect. It asks him to look inward, to explore why he was unable to meet her in the places she needed him most, and to reflect on the emotional barriers he might have carried into the relationship. It's not just about what she did or didn't do, it's about who he was unwilling or unable to be. This kind of redirection doesn't offer immediate clarity. It unfolds gradually, like a fog lifting from the mind. He may try to justify her absence or blame circumstances, but eventually he comes face to face with the truth. She chose not to shrink herself to keep the relationship afloat. In doing so, she redirected the narrative. Instead of waiting for him to change, she chose to honor her truth, and that decision becomes a silent teacher in his life. There's a deep internal shift that happens when a man realizes he wasn't left out of spite but out of necessity, that the woman he once had didn't walk away to hurt him but to heal herself. And once that understanding sets in, it's no longer about regret, it's about recognition. He sees what he lost, not because she demanded his attention, but because her silence spoke what words never could. The redirection she gave him through her leaving becomes a pivotal moment, a call to finally grow into the man he wasn't ready to be while she was still there. True femininity doesn't come from control, pressure, or emotional dependency. It flows from a place of inner freedom. When a woman refuses to cling to a man, even when her heart aches to stay, she demonstrates a rare kind of strength. She understands that love is not something to be begged for, bargained with, or manipulated into existence. She lets go not because she has stopped caring, but because she chooses not to bind herself to something that cannot breathe freely. This act alone can shift something deep within a man. While he may not immediately understand it, there's a part of him that feels the weight of her decision, the unmistakable calm of someone who has stopped trying to convince or chase. There's a paradox in emotional detachment that many men find deeply attractive and haunting. A woman who can love fully and still walk away when her needs are unmet sends a powerful message. She does not try to possess him or keep him bound by obligation. She offers him space to be himself, but also reserves the right to walk away if that space becomes a place where she is no longer emotionally safe. This kind of freedom challenges the traditional dynamic many men expect. Instead of holding on to him tightly and making her love conditional, she releases him without bitterness, trusting that whatever is real doesn't need to be forced. In that release, she holds the highest form of self-respect, and that leaves an imprint on a man's heart. Most are used to relationships where emotional pressure is used to secure connection, but when a woman does the opposite, when she backs away with love, not resentment, he begins to see her differently. She's not trying to win him over or make him stay. She's simply stating, through her actions, that her love is valuable and will not be wasted on someone unwilling or unready to meet it. This creates a powerful inner conflict in a man. The absence of pressure removes the distractions. There's no emotional game to analyze, no arguments to replay. All he's left with is the memory of her openness, her softness, and the freedom she gave him, even in goodbye. And because her leaving wasn't rooted in control, but in surrender, it speaks louder than any words ever could. It says, I loved you, but I love myself too. That kind of woman becomes unforgettable, not because she tried to be, but because her freedom challenged him in ways he didn't expect. She offered love with no strings and walked away with no chains. That grace, that ease, that self-contained peace becomes something he recalls long after she's gone. And in the stillness she leaves behind, he begins to see that real femininity isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go and doing it with a kind of quiet power that lingers in a man's soul. When a woman detaches emotionally, many mistake it for coldness. But emotional detachment, when it comes from a place of clarity, is not about shutting down. It's about seeing things for what they really are without distortion. A woman who has poured her energy, her time, and her heart into a relationship doesn't suddenly stop feeling. Instead, she reaches a point where she realizes that continuing to invest in something that depletes her is a form of self-abandonment. So she steps back, not because she no longer cares, but because she can no longer afford to ignore what her inner truth is telling her. Emotional clarity is quiet, but it's powerful. It doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, and it doesn't try to justify, it simply sees. She sees the emotional imbalance. She sees the lack of effort, the growing distance, the subtle disconnections that have accumulated over time, and most importantly, she sees her own role in trying to hold it all together. That clarity becomes the turning point. It's what allows her to choose peace over confusion, solitude over chaos, and alignment over attachment. A man often doesn't expect this. He might have grown used to her emotional availability, her patience, her willingness to forgive and try again. He may not have seen the signs of her slipping away because she didn't make noise about it. She simply stopped engaging at the level she used to. Her words became fewer, her reactions more measured, her presence quieter, but not because she was angry, because she was done trying to explain her worth. That emotional shift is not a withdrawal of love, it's a declaration of truth. A woman in that space isn't punishing, she's preserving. This preservation is what leaves a lasting mark on the man. It confronts him with a kind of silence that feels heavier than conflict. He doesn't hear her saying she's hurt anymore. He just feels the space where her warmth used to live. That space isn't filled with blame or resentment. It's filled with the unmistakable presence of a woman who has reached emotional closure without needing permission. And that is what haunts him, because she didn't ask him to change. She didn't try to force him to feel something he wasn't ready to feel. She simply chose herself in the end. Her clarity becomes the mirror he never expected. It reflects not only who she was, but who he was during the time she gave her heart to him. And that reflection doesn't fade easily. It lingers in his mind, not just as a memory of love lost, but as a wake-up call. He realizes she didn't walk away emotionally because she stopped feeling, but because she started seeing clearly who he was, who she was becoming, and how much she had outgrown the version of love that no longer matched her truth. In the end, the reason men fall harder for the women who let them go isn't rooted in mystery. It's grounded in truth. These women don't leave to hurt, shame, or control. They leave to heal, to honor their own worth, and to reclaim their emotional freedom. And in doing so, they reveal a strength that speaks louder than any plea ever could. Their love was never weak. It was courageous. Their silence wasn't emptiness, it was clarity. And their letting go wasn't the end of love, it was the beginning of self-respect. It is this quiet power, this unwavering dignity that echoes in a man's heart long after her footsteps fade. Because when a woman chooses herself, She doesn't just walk away, she rises. And it is in that rising that he finally sees everything she was and everything he wasn't ready to hold.